Today I'm going to show you how to make royal icing with meringue powder or egg white powder. Either one works. And then I'm going to quickly show you how to ice sugar cookies with that royal icing. We'll make flooding and outline consistencies. I'll show you how to get the perfect consistency for each. And then I'll give you a couple quick tips for decorating. You can use this royal icing recipe to decorate for any holiday or birthdays or really any occasion. This is the best royal icing recipe because it uses lemon juice. And the lemon juice not only cuts the sweetness of all the confectioner sugar, but it also adds its own flavor. So you can do some really nice flavor pairings with your cookie and your icing. And you end up with a cookie that isn't too sweet or too cloying and has a really wonderful, well-rounded flavor that people are gonna be like, wow, that's special. If you're enjoying this video, please be sure to hit the subscribe button below and click the bell icon to be notified every time I post a new and delicious recipe. Let's get into it. So, royal icing. Super simple. And we'll walk you through all the steps. We are gonna make this in a stand mixer. You could 100% make this by hand in a bowl with a whisk, but my hand said no. So we're gonna do it in a stand mixer today. Also, you can scale this recipe up to as big as you want, okay? All right, so what we're gonna do here, in a bowl of our stand mixer, or regular bowl, we are gonna put this is lemon juice, okay? Now, this does flavor the icing like lemon. It cuts some of the sweetness. It makes the icing just absolutely phenomenal, okay? You can use orange juice. You can use water if you don't want flavor, which is what I would do if I was gonna use this to frost my chocolate rolled sugar cookies, right? Sometimes you don't want that flavor. Sometimes you do. So the lemon is just really nice, cuts the sweetness. So good on sugar cookies, okay? Just trust, all right? This is meringue powder. It's basically dried meringue that you're rehydrating. You could 100% do this exact same recipe with dried egg whites, so that you bought online, whatever. It works with both. I know because I've done it. Now, meringue powder sometimes has a nice vanilla flavor to it, so there's a selling point for you. Just go ahead and add that in. And then I like to just do this part by hand because it's so small. I just like to whisk the egg whites in, okay? If you see, if there's some clumps, just don't stress about it, okay? This is a no stress situation. You can see it getting frothy and already starting to do its thing. Go ahead and grab your stand mixer. Obviously, we're gonna use the whisk here. We're gonna just whip this. So we're kind of at like I would call it, it's not a real thing, but we're gonna call it the pillow stage, okay? It's like fluffy, but no peaks are forming, okay? Let's check her, okay? So, the easiest way to check it is to take it out, give a little whisk, just to kind of evenly treat everything. And then we're gonna go ahead and get some on a spatula. I mean, no. So, it's like pre-soft peaks. Pre-soft peaks. Again, another stage that I made up just now. We're gonna keep going. Okay, almost soft peaks. So close, guys. So close. Take a little bit. Ah, look at that. Okay, so you can see it's actually closer to stiff than it is to soft, but for this purpose it doesn't really matter. But soft peaks is kind of where we're going for. So, that's a soft peak. You see that? Do you see the straight and then the flop and how it's held its little space right there? Oh, so nice. So all this means is that we're gonna add our powdered sugar. Now, I pre-sifted my powdered sugar because mine was pretty clumpy. You can just put it all in. And now put it on low. Low. Say it again, low. No powdered sugar clouds, okay? There's enough on me already. So we're just gonna go ahead and let that work its way in. Go ahead and scrape it down. In a bigger batch, you wouldn't necessarily need to do that, but this is kind of the smallest batch that I'd wanna make in this size stand mixer. This is a 7-quart, so you know, you don't wanna be in a smaller mixer this batch. You might not need to scrape or anything, but You want to make it as smooth as possible before you start adding any of your milk, okay? You want to kind of work this in there. You can turn it up a little bit. All right, it's really, really thick, okay? That's good. This is just plain whole milk, and I'm going to use this to loosen my frosting. Now, I don't want to add all of this at one time. If I put all of this in, it might be too loose. Depending on the day, the humidity in your room, this frosting may be more or less thick or loose, so you don't want to just be like pouring it in there. There's several wonderful things about this frosting. One, it tastes delicious as it is because of the lemon juice. You don't need to add any additional flavorings. It doesn't just taste like sugar, and it also is super white. The way it is, the way it's written, so you don't have to, you don't have to add additional white food coloring. You can to make it like Snow White, but just know she's going to be opaque and white, just the way she is. Okay, let's go ahead and add the rest of our milk. Right. You're not trying to beat in air bubbles or anything, so you don't want to be like crazy with the mixer. Now, the important thing to know at this stage is this is very thick. Depending on what you're going to do with it, you may want to use it at this consistency. You may want to thin it out more. Now, if you're going to ice sugar cookies, what you want to have is 2 different consistencies for every single color that you're going to make. Oh dear, yes, break out the piping bags, guys. So you're going to want to have a flooding and an outline consistency. So a flooding is thinner, it's looser, it's going to spread more easily. You can make it too thin. We'll talk about that later. You want a thinner and then a thicker to outline. Now, if you're going to use it like this and you're just going to use plain white, then you can start making your different consistencies. If you are going to add food coloring, you're going to want to do that before you create your perfect consistencies for outlining and flooding, because if you add food dye, which does have liquid in it, to a perfect outline consistency, you might end up with a flooding consistency. Right, so we've made our icing and we know what we're going to decorate, so we are just going to figure out the colors that we want to make. You're going to want to do each color and then each consistency in a separate bowl, just for ease. So I actually am going to do white first. So you'll notice that I put plastic wrap directly on the surface of my frosting, and I did this so that it didn't develop the skin. This is essential because this is, confectioner sugar based, and it will 100% develop skin almost instantly. So you're going to want to protect your frosting, and you will waste a little bit, but it is worth it. So I'm going to do white first. This is just going to make it easiest for me to show you how to change the consistency to get like the 2 different consistencies that you want. All right, so I'm going to put white in here, and I'm not going to add any additional food coloring. I do have white food coloring that I can add if I want it to be extra super bright white. But for me, my purposes right now, it's not that serious. So we are going to want, for each color, we're going to want 2 piping bags. I know. So you're going to want to have the piping bags in a glass or in something so that you can easily transfer. So just open her up, put her like that, and repeat. Now remember that you want to add your dye. If you're adding dye at this stage, you're going to add your dye, and then you're going to add more milk. Okay, so this right here, this is too thick. You see how it's like glopping in? That's too thick. The line is going to break. It's not going to meld with the flooding icing. It's just going to kind of set before you're done. This is not what you want. So we're going to add a little bit of milk, like a little bit, and then we're going to stir that in. Okay, you're just going to want to get your stirring just hat on, because that's what we're going to be doing. So go ahead and give that a stir, and then kind of check it. So, okay, you see how now what it's doing is it's hitting the surface. It sits there for 10 seconds, and then it goes back in. right? So that's exactly what we want for the outline consistency. So we're going to take some of this, and remember that you're not going to do an even distribution between your two piping bags because you need more flooding icing than you do outline icing. Now, all is not lost because you can easily make outline icing into flooding icing. So don't stress too much about that part, but just take a little bit for your outlines. Also at this stage you can add more, and then, so this is your outline. The easiest way to tell between the two bags, you can label them, or you can just know that the bag with more in it is your flooding, but you might want to label. In the bakery, we always label because you just never know. There's so much of everything. This is a lot of outline. I will have to make this into flooding at some point, but that's fine. So right now, I'm just gonna do what I just showed you where I kind of squish it all into the bottom and then put it over there, and I'll show you what I do later. Okay, so what we've got here, we've got our outline still, and we're gonna make this flooding. Now, I don't make my flooding too thin, because if you make it too thin to the point where it just kind of like spreads itself out, I've found with this icing in particular that it doesn't set. So you won't get that nice soft but set icing that you can stack cookies, you can ship them. That will not happen. So if you add too much milk, your cookie icing will not set. So I like to, err on the side of caution. And then if I need to add a little bit more later, I can certainly do that. So you can see that that was like maybe a half a teaspoon. What we're looking for with our flooding consistency is for it to immediately meld into the rest. Okay, so it's still sitting on the surface. You see where I draw it across and it sits and then it goes in. I want it just a little bit looser. This would work as flooding. Okay, you can flood with your outline. You are gonna get a thicker frosting, and it's not going to go as far. So you're not going to be able to ice as many cookies if you don't make two consistencies. So let's check her. So we've got this, and we're going to go ahead and roll that on the top. And I mean, that's pretty good, but it is still sitting on there just a little bit too, like a beat. And I would like for her to not do that. So I'm going to go ahead and just add maybe even a quarter. It wasn't even a quarter teaspoon. It's just like a little bit. A dabble. Okay. You see the ribbon, and then the ribbon dissipates. It's like almost instantaneous. That is what you want. This is flooding. Perfect flooding. So go ahead and take this, and we'll make our flooding bag right here. So that's our flooding bag. The good thing about a white is that we can reuse this bowl. If we made a color, we probably wouldn't. We want to take the time to rinse it out and do it again. And so we've got our two bags, we've got our outline, we've got our flooding, and I'm going to place those right here, and we're going to keep going. All right, so I would like yellow. All right, let's talk about food dye and this royal icing. I mean, royal icing in general, but this one in particular, obviously. I do prefer a gel food dye. That is because there isn't as much water. So I have a liquid food dye that I use for, say, red velvet cake, things like that. But that's not the best for this application because it will actually, by the time you get the color that you want, if you want a bright, vibrant color, by the time you get that color, your frosting will be loosey-goosey. It will not set, it will not outline, and it will just kind of run. And we don't want that. So if you want a pastel and you don't have gel and you don't really care, then you can certainly dye this frosting, royal icing, with liquid food dye, which is just, liquid food dye is just that dye that you find at the grocery store. It's really liquidy. It comes out like water. That's liquid food dye, and you can certainly do that, but I would actually, you're not going to want to add any additional milk. You're going to want to take your raw icing, if you will, and then add that liquid food dye, and basically you can only add it until you get it to a consistency of a flooding consistency. And you kind of want to just ride that line between flooding and outline so that you don't have to have two different ones, and you're still going to want to outline and then flood to keep those nice crisp lines. And you can do it. Here's a picture of cookies that I did with 100% liquid food dye. But you can see that the colors are not as vibrant. There's no punchy greens, no deep, deep reds. Like you can't get that with the liquid food dye. So I'm gonna get off my soapbox now, and we're gonna dye some royal icing. All right, I'm gonna take my sample. Wow, aggressive. I want yellow. I'm gonna do some full cookie stars. So I want a decent amount of yellow. It's not just a decorative element. So I'm gonna add a little, I'm gonna do a decent amount of yellow here. All right, so you're gonna want a little spatula for each of these colors. Bonus points if your spatula is the color of your icing. Oh, it's just really great happenstance. So I want a pretty yellow. I don't want it to be like aggressive. So I'm not going to start out crazy. Now, you're like, I don't want it to be that bright. Me neither. So what do? We add white. Yeah, that's what's up. Okay, this is also a good brand. Chef Master, okay. Okay, so you just stir it in, and then you're gonna get, the more white you add, the more pastel it is. Now, you could also, if you don't have white food dye, you could add more frosting, or icing rather. I actually really like this color. This is a very nice pale yellow color. This is a nice egg color, or just a lovely yellow. I'm gonna make stars, so I want some of my stars to be yellow. Now, this is, you guessed it, too thick. Look at that, gloppy, right? You see, we added a decent amount of food dye to it, and liquid food dye would have made that too runny. Or it might have been just right, but who knows. Let's get our outline consistency. That's good. All right. So I'm gonna add just a little bit, not a lot. We're just outlining. And then I'm gonna add just a little bit more milk, not a lot. Because again, don't forget that you also just took some of the icing out. So, you're working with less to begin with. If at this stage you add a little bit too much milk, do not add 10x. You can, it will change your icing. Add more icing. All right, so you see how that's holding a line quickly and then flooding in or going in, and that's exactly what we want. So next, all right, we've got our yellow. That's our flooding, this is our outline, as you can tell because there's way more flooding. Now I'm gonna do one more. I'm gonna do a pink, and then I'm gonna add red to it and make a red. So, because I want both, and I'm not in the business of wasting time. So, I think I have an endless supply of tiny spatulas. All right, so here we go. You gotta choose which pink you want, right? I actually, I want two different pinks. So I'm gonna split this. If you have a tiny bit like this, and you don't need, squeezing it out is gonna make it too intense, just take a toothpick or dip a knife, or the tip of a knife or something in there, and then you can actually just dip that into your frosting. Okay, so this is like a nice soft pink. I do want just a little bit more color there. So I'm just gonna dab that there. So my plan with this is to make little decorations. So I actually am not gonna add any additional milk to it to loosen it up, okay? So I am going to be very careful with my food dye tips. Okay, and I'm gonna put this in its own little piping bag, which I will preemptively cut. Now, another fun fact about colored royal icing is that the color does deepen overnight. It will not continue to deepen, but it will deepen in the piping bag, like sealed up overnight. And then, so if you are going to use it for a couple days, or if you whatever, you can plan ahead, you can do it that way. But just be aware, because sometimes, if you are going to finish the next day and you've got cookies that are two different colors, like visibly different colors. Now, it will not continue to deepen on the cookie. So if you pipe it, the color will stay as the color is. It will not deepen after you pipe it. this I'm gonna make red. And then we'll do a little fuchsia, just because, you know, I really want to. The colors are just remember that the colors are super concentrated. You see how little that was and how vibrant this is? Love it. Love it. Okay. Now, red is one of those colors that you might want to let deepen overnight, because no matter how much dye you add right now, it will still look just not quite bright red. But if you let this amount of food dye that I just put in there sit overnight, it will deepen into a deep dark red. What we're gonna do is we're gonna make, basically, make ties. You could use rubber bands or something if you have rubber bands. You know, they sell clips, but why? So just go ahead, I like to use just plastic wrap, super easy. Okay, so take your piping bag, get it all down there, you already squished it down there, and then you're gonna take your plastic wrap and you're gonna wrap it around like so, and then you're gonna tie it. The good thing is this makes it super tight. There's no getting away from this. So we will clean them up in a second. Just go ahead and do all of them. Okay, so I'm just gonna snip the tops. This is just cleanup, so if you don't care, you don't need to do this. So let's just quickly go over how to actually ice how to use royal icing. So I've got my little outline bag here, and you want to make sure that I always cut the smallest, I cut it smaller than I think it needed to be, and then I also cut off any excess on the edges, because otherwise you'll find that has a trail, and just kind of give it a, yeah, that's nice. Okay, so we've got our outline, and then I go ahead and I just cut my flooding bag. You don't want it to be so big that, you know, it just pours out and you have no control, but you do want to, you don't want to have to like work for it, right? We're already working hard enough. So I go ahead and I outline a couple at a time. So you just need to figure out what works for you and what, you know, hand position or, you know, whatever that is, like whatever works for you. So you want to do like a couple at a time. You don't want to do too many, or the outline will actually dry before you get to the flooding stage. Now, if you mess up your outline and you want it to go a little further out or whatever, then go ahead and fix it. You know, sometimes it's not fixable, sometimes it is. So sometimes you just kind of have to live and let live, you know? But also sometimes it looks way worse than it is when, like when you fill it in, it kind of covers some flaws. So every single, you know, new shape you do, every just bag is different. It's just, you gotta work with it, you know? You don't stress out. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. And then so you wanna go back with your flooding bag. Some people use a cake tester or a toothpick to spread their flooding icing. I find that to be an unnecessary step. It does make a thinner layer. I don't have time for that. So I just use my piping bag. People use squeeze bottles, and that's fine. But I find that, you know, a squeeze bottle tip is only so small, and so it's, you know, you're not gonna get as nice, clean a line as you might from something else. So that still looks pretty shoddy, even though I filled it in. So we'll just make her disappear. And by that I mean I will eat it, or my husband will. So again, you can do if you do too little flooding icing, then you will end up with bald patches. How sad. If you do too much, then it might spill over the side. It'll also be super thick, which doesn't really matter as long as your consistency is right. If it's not right, then it might not set completely. But you know, if you've gotten this far, I trust you. Okay, so just go ahead and just use the piping bag as its own little stick. And then the good thing about also using the piping bag to spread it is that you can continue to squeeze the icing out as you need it, because sometimes you just don't put enough in it in every single space. And so, you know, giving a little extra. Now, if you're gonna do something else, like a detail on here, let this set. It doesn't have to set overnight, it just needs to set enough so that whatever you're gonna do is it doesn't just blend into it. Now, on the contrary, if you would like whatever you're going to do to blend in, like if you're gonna make a little hearts or something, or whatever decor, you want something to be swirled, you're gonna want to do that while it's still wet, right? See if we can't do some hearts. Now you'll see that they've started to sink in, right? Even though I'm not pushing them in, they're just doing that all on their own. And that's fine because that's what we want. We want it to be one cohesive layer and not a whole bunch of different things. So I'm gonna take this toothpick and I'm just gonna drag it. Oh, that didn't have a tip. I'm just gonna drag it through. I'm gonna make myself some hearts. I waited a little long, I was a little slow, but you get the idea. All right, these guys I'm gonna let sit because I actually want to do a different thing with them, so I'm gonna let them do their thing. And these guys I'm gonna, okay, we'll just go ahead, I'll do one at a time, because sometimes, so I found personally that 3 is the max that I can outline before my outline starts to set by the time I get to it. So if I do more than 3, or you know, sometimes in my prime I could do 5, but I'm not in my prime anymore. So we're gonna do the same thing, but we're actually gonna make this a little bit bigger. So the trick sometimes is if it's too thin, then like if it's the whole opening is too small, you'll actually get squiggles, even though your icing is perfectly fine. So we'll make them a little bit bigger. We're not going to be so dainty, although I did like that aesthetic, but here we are. So we're just doing dots, and those dots are become hearts. I'm going to take my toothpick, and we're going to go through. Isn't it crazy that they already started to set? By golly, she's gorgeous. All right, you get the idea. Outline flood, decorate or not. So now you know how to make royal icing and decorate cookies. You can get as ornate and decorative as you want. You can do as many colors as you want. You can make as big a batch as you want.